international bestseller, has been read widely and translated into so many languages. It's in many ways become the introduction to Indian foreign policy for most people around the world. And a sizable portion of the book you have devoted to our commitment to multilateralism and to our ethos of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and all these things. So we'd like you to start, Dr. Jaishankar, by talking about what is it about the India way and the Indian ethos, and how does it, what is the congruence with the G20? Because this is the 18th summit that we are hosting in 2023. Many countries have done prior to us and will continue and take over the baton from us. But this moment, 2023, is so special. And how does it tie to the India ethos and the India way, sir?
Well, it's interesting that you made that connection because, you know, to me, India Way had three concepts. One was, it was very important to understand the larger environment, the global environment. The second was that, in a way, within that environment, how do you focus on priorities? How do you select priorities? How do you define priorities? And the third is, how do you actually get it done, which is the Indian way, you may say. So look at the three of them. Why is our presidency of the G20 important? The first reason is the environment. That the world environment today is very difficult. You have a very sharp east-west polarization. You have very big north-south divides, gaps, which have grown during this COVID period due to and aggravated by conflicts. The second is, within this larger universe of problems, what are the priorities? And we have focused on the priorities using the concept of Global South. That the key priorities today in the world are sustainable development growth. How do you maintain it? How do you ensure it doesn't regress? How do you today ensure the resources for green development? How do you ensure that there is the digital opportunities are not missed by many countries? So you make, in a sense, a key set of issues. And finally, what has been different the way we have done it? And I think a lot of it derives from Prime Minister Modi's belief in Jan Bhagidari, that typically conferences in this country, even big conferences, and I've seen quite a few in my own times, big conferences frankly used to take place in Vigyan Bhavan, and its impact zone was about 1 kilometer in either direction of Vigyan Bhavan. The idea that you can actually take opportunity for leadership and for bringing, your summoning powers, your influence, and have this become a participative exercise, that to do it in 60 cities, to do it in every state and union territory, to involve people. I mean, if you look at it today, the youth of the country is involved, scientists of the country are involved, academicians are involved, cultural figures are involved. So there is actually a sense today of popular involvement, which to me is a very, very new experience. I've never seen, in 45 years, I've never seen something like this.
The world has never seen this kind of G20, says Dr. Jaishankar. And sir, the question of people's participation, I want to just stretch it a little further and ask you about what is it you've been observing, India and writing about India for so long, and now you are a major policy maker. Indians as a people have really taken the ownership and the stakeholdership of this G20. And we have seen, at least 15 million people formally associated with the events, and several, times more people taking an active interest in it. Absolutely. And everyone knows the G20 is about global governance, global leadership, taking responsibilities. So we'd like you to reflect on why you think this juncture in history, why we seem to be ready for global leadership as a people and as a society.
Well, I would say, especially in the last decade, there have been multiple realizations in the country, in our society. One, for a variety of reasons, people believe today that the world matters much more to their daily lives, to their challenges, to their opportunities. They're both I would say good and not so good reasons for it. They see, for example, today the opportunities of the world, travel, tourism, workplace, technology, all of that is there. At the same time, they've also seen during COVID that something that started in another city, to our north, far away, came back and completely took over our lives. So I would say the average person intuitively today is far more globalized. It's also because we today, the screen time we all spend is so much more. We get up in the morning and our first reaction is really, what is it that I have missed when I was sleeping? So there's a natural inclination to reach out to the world, and it's become internalized with all of us here, and perhaps, and I would say it is across location, it is across generation, it is across profession, it is across income, so that connection with the world. The second, I would say, is also a stronger sense of capability and contribution. The feeling that we Indians, we make a difference. That when we see, it could be the fact that when you see our own ability to secure our students in Ukraine, or the fact that you go out to an earthquake in Turkey and are among the early responders, or the fact that there's a successful Chandrayaan-3 mission. So the belief in this country that we can do more, we should be doing more, and that's very interesting because in many societies actually, societies are retracting, that they are turning inwards. Whereas I think today what is different about India is especially the younger generation, I would say, far more globalized, far more optimistic. It's also in some ways an outcome of our demographics that for us today the world will be a growing workplace, that an era of a knowledge economy will require the movement in the mobility of talent and skills. So people see that today. I mean, it could be different professions. You see many more Indians traversing around the world, and the younger generation doesn't see that as a challenge. Someone say, when I was starting off my work life, to me, I would have probably been intimidated at the idea of going out. That's not the case. I mean, people deal with it much more naturally. Yeah,
so we are much more comfortable with the idea of India being at the center of the world, cynosure of all eyes. And
I would say, Sriram, we are much more confident. We are much more confident about ourselves. I think the last decade, what we have done has given that feeling to society. I mean, see, even in adversity, there are societies which have been really shattered by COVID. I mean, they're still picking up the pieces, they're still feeling the pain. Whereas you look at the resilience in India, that sense, yes, it was traumatic, but we set up the systems, we could respond to it, we created our vaccine, we were able to get, the biggest vaccination program in the world done.
And so the credibility on the world stage, and especially at the G20 in the multilateral fora, also derived from the domestic strengths, isn't it? I mean, these are not really, you can't compartmentalize them. And so what you're saying is that we are also being taken much more seriously because of this, the accumulation of achievements in governance. And you also often spoken about how our domestic attributes are now, becoming international preferences. That is the sign of a rising power, especially at G20s.
You are absolutely right. Today, as I said at the start, we have these two big contradictions, if you would, the East-West polarization, the North-South divide. And we have that ability today to bridge this. But even if you look at a bridge, sometimes the credibility of the bridge is also an issue. A country which has delivered today so strongly, when I go out in the world and it may interest your viewers to know, a lot of the conversations I have, they're not about Indian foreign policy. They're actually about Indian domestic happenings. People want to know, for example, how did you get a CoWIN platform done? How are you doing your own 5G stack? Who are these people who managed a Chandrayaan landing close to the South Pole? So there's an enormous curiosity in the world today, and I would say a growing respect in the world today about what it is that India has managed to do in the last decade. So when we tell people, and our numbers by any standards are mind-boggling. When you tell people, look, we don't worry, during that period, we actually, despite all those apocalyptic predictions about us, we actually kept up, food support for such a large number, 800 million people, that through financial support to the most vulnerable, even something like Mudra loans. I mean, when you throw numbers like, this scheme is 400 million, that scheme is 500 million, food support is 800 million, houses are the beneficiaries, the family members put together is 150 million. I think the world is waking up to the fact, and they probably, if I were to single out one particular aspect of what we are doing, it is the digital. That our digital delivery, I think, is evoking a lot of respect. I mean, when you talk to people about cashless transactions, I mean, we are today, I don't know, 40 times the number of the US in terms of what we do. I mean, it tells you what the digital embrace has been. So, to me, one aspect, or very important aspect of this G20 is that from a perception in the world of an argumentative India, I think today we have become the delivery India, that this is a credible India, this is a actionable India.
Absolutely. Dr. Jaishankar, now coming to the diplomacy part, I mean, your ministry and your staff are, I think, burning the proverbial midnight oil simply to get everything in place for the summit.
We're not burning that oil. That's a politically very incorrect statement. We are getting solar and storing it. But
it's a renewable energy. Yes, India's renewable energy. So on this matter, every host tries to find a commonality and bring these differing viewpoints and to hand of consensus with a joint statement, joint communique. And more important than just a piece of paper which everybody will sign at the summit, it's also about the agenda going forward. And on this, India is famed to be this bridge, the credible bridge, as you said. So is there at least one thematic area you'd like to talk about in particular where we have been able to reduce the differences and create some kind of a common ground for the G20? Obviously, the chair has a very critical role to bring the flock together. So if you'd like to throw light on one or two areas of the G20 this year.
I don't want to jump the gun. I think we have to wait till the 10th of September to see what the outcomes are. But rather than talk about a theme, when I said that there's an environment and then there are priorities, I want to emphasize the priorities. These words, Global South, we have definitely managed to get it on the lexicon of global diplomacy today. When we first started using it and pressing that word at the beginning of this year, there are a lot of raised eyebrows across the world. Today I see more and more countries using it. But I think more than the lexicon or the dictionary of diplomacy, we have managed to get it on the conscience of the world. That we have managed to take, when you say Global South, what are we talking about? We are talking today of debt, of food prices, of energy prices, of the ability to provide resources for education and nutrition and health, of affordable, accessible health, of not just setting ambitious targets, which are very much easier to do, but of providing resources, assured resources to reach that. So there are a whole set of issues today. When the moment you say the focus is on Global South, from that directly there are a set of focus issues that come. The focus issues are exactly what I lay out to you. So this, to my mind, will be really what the G20 will be looking at. I mean, the G20 will be looking at, how do you today deal with the debt predicament of so many countries? How do you deal with the fact that sustainable development goals have actually regressed in the last few years because of the
pandemic and the war,
of the pandemic and the conflict. They will be dealing with issues like food and fertilizer and and sometimes you're right. Often people think these are words, but many words have very practical consequences. If you look at this initiative of the Prime Minister of propagating millets, do just reflect for a moment. Even I'm only giving you India's case. Now this can have global consequences. In a country like India, we produce roughly 17% millets to the wheat production. So roughly, if wheat production is 100, millet production is 16, 17, something like that. Now, millets are produced in smaller land holdings, drier land holdings, use less water, typically produced by the small farmer. The problem is a lot of them are consumed on site. They are not marketed because there's no awareness, there's no demand. Now, if you see the last year, the millet campaign, what you will see is that if you are going to increase grain production, here is a large untapped possibility. And when you travel around the world, for example, I've seen in Africa, a lot of African countries actually have grown up eating millets, by the way, just like we did.
Yeah.
In our own lives, younger people would be surprised to know wheat really came in a big way in 1960s and 70s. That many parts of India, even today, have if not memories, certainly still have practice of millet consumption. So that's a very practical, you can say, okay, there's a campaign called International Year of Millets. Now I'll give you another example. This initiative of Prime Ministers called LIFE, Lifestyle for Environmental, Lifestyle for Environment. Now the fact is, there are so many daily practices which we can build into our lives, which actually would have a impact on the environment. So it isn't, we should not reduce the climate action debate to a kind of a coal fundamentalism or a fossil fundamentalism. That is one aspect. That is
the
not,
emissions side,
but there are so many other aspects to it. So. Right. And finally, a lot of it is today about resources. That how do we, it's not that there are no resources in the world. We have seen in other situations, the same amount of resources which may not be available for climate action may suddenly be mobilized for some other cause. So it's possible. So how do we deal with that resources problem more seriously?
Very much. These are all the key problems of the global south, and India has been highlighting those at the G20, says Dr. Jaishankar. So coming to the question of multilateralism now, Prime Minister Modi has said at the G20 foreign ministers meeting, I quote, multilateralism is in a state of crisis, global governance has failed. And he tasked the G20 to try and revive the confidence in multilateralism, the very idea that 15, 20 also can get together and do something together for the sake of the, the wretched of the earth, so to say. That, have we been able to infuse that especially among the richer countries? This is always a question we have in India, so because of the north-south divide you spoke about. And how do we do it as chair of G20 to convince them that, look, the non-members, the ones who are outside the G20 corridors also matter?
Look, let me make 2 points here. One, international relations is both competitive and collaborative, by its nature.
Sure.
G20 is the kind of forum where the expectation of the world is that the collaborative phase, the collaborative instincts would be much, much stronger than the competitive instincts. Okay. So this is a time where every G20 member feels that responsibility, that what they decide when they come here, the directions they set, the understandings they reach, the concepts which they propagate, these have long-lasting consequences. Okay. In a way, today you can say, because the G20 is far more contemporary, because it's 20 years, give or take, as a forum, as opposed to, say, the UN, which is 4 times that age. Because it is contemporary, because it is more broad-based, I think the responsibility, you can truly say today that it is the premier multilateral forum.
Absolutely.
And therefore the responsibility on this forum is that much more. And that is really what we will see come into play on the 9th and 10th of September, which is these 20 countries and the 9 guest countries and the international organizations actually having that belief that, you know, what they will agree on is very, very crucial. They may have the differences, you know, among them, but that's for a moment kind of to be dealt with in the right forum, in the right situation, in another way. The second point I would make, look, yes, I'm shining the spotlight on Global South. I'm using the Global South as a concept to highlight a whole set of problems which to the to the mind of the world are the real remit of the G20. You know, the G20 is supposed to be all about global growth and development. But I want to make one point. This is not, you know, it's not a problem of the Global South in itself. Anything which happens in the Global South, in a globalized world, let me tell you, will affect the Global North as well. You know, it's not, you know, there's no firewall. I mean, Europe has discovered that, for example, when it has come to, challenges in Africa, or, you today, it could be a climate catastrophe, it could be a conflict, it could be, we don't know, food crisis. Any major crisis today, it is no longer to keep it within a sort of a firewalled
silo
enclosure. I think everything today has global implications, and nothing reminds us more strongly of that than COVID. But it actually showed you, COVID was such a stark reminder today of how much mobility there is today in the world.
Yeah, problems.
So we are all in it together. You know, this is not just Global South has a problem, so Global North comes and says, okay, let me see what I can do to the best of my ability. I think their necks are equally on the line on this one.
Yeah, so the interests are intertwined because of the interdependence.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Dr. Jaishankar, last question before I bring in the audience.
Sure.
We have been talking about the South as our main pillar of our G20 agenda. Now there is a quartet of sorts. We took over from Indonesia, then India 23, then Brazil 24, and then South Africa 2025. 4 years, this extended spell of G20 leadership under developing countries. Do you think that will help in a way to steer the institution and even broader the world order and multilateralism in a more desirable and more ethical and more just direction? Because ultimately that is our objective, isn't it, as chair, to steer the entire international discourse and deliberation and decision making in a fairer and more equitable manner?
Yes, I think that's a valid point. This, of course, was a complete coincidence that the flow happened this particular way. But you must also bear in mind that in the G20, there's a culture of a troika, that the previous chair, the current chair, and the next chair. So, for example, we would be the previous chair in the Brazilian presidency, like we were the future chair in the Indonesian presidency. So there is there's a continuum, if you would, out here. It also, I think, is helpful that India, Brazil, and South Africa, we have our own grouping, IPSA, as countries who want to see a more democratized, fairer, a more equitable, more inclusive world. It is very much part of that. And my own sense is, that inclusiveness, which has been so much at the center of the vision of the government, especially in the last decade in India, I think to varying degrees that also has impacted outside. Many of these governments and countries have a natural sort of resonance, partiality towards that. We, of course, as I said, because we have not just spoken about inclusiveness but have delivered on the ground, I think that is also something which is impacting people's thinking. So the combination of all of this, I think, bodes well for the direction of the G20. But what is most important right now is that in New Delhi, in the coming week, that all 20 countries come together with a fullest sense of responsibility, understand today how critical the global situation is, how many parts, how many regions of the world are actually looking towards the G20.
Yes.
And the fact that we did the Voice of Global South Summit, consulted 125 countries, are putting their issues on the table because they are physically not there at the table. The fact that we have taken the lead in advocating the permanent membership of the African Union in the G20, I think all these are in a way a direction in which the G20 should go, and I'm very confident that the countries coming after us will see it in a very similar light.
So viewers, Dr. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, is saying that there is a clear carry forward of Indian ideas that will continue. So the legacy of our G20 presidency is going to be lasting. We have no doubt about it. Now we have a very knowledgeable audience here in the Doordarshan studio joining us, and we have time for a few questions. May I invite Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia to start. He is a former Director General of Indian Council of World Affairs and former Indian Foreign Service officer.
Thank you very much. We all stand to benefit from this wonderful conversation. I just have a small question. Africanists of India are very pleased with the continuing focus that the government has given on the cause of the Global South. And it seems to us that we are very close to attaining one of the goals, which is to get African Union membership of G20. Are there still some holdouts, and if so, are we working strongly on them in the next few days to simply secure that goal? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Let me make two comments here. One, in many ways, I think the focus on Africa, on putting forward the cause of the Global South, I think it's a very natural external reflection of how the Modi government thinks within the country. That if your fundamental domestic policy is leave no one behind, that same leave no one behind also applies beyond your borders. So to me, there are two sides of the same coin, and I would say the importance of social justice is as crucial to me in international relations as it is in domestic policy. Regarding the AU permanent membership of the G20, I think we are very confident that this will happen at the summit. There are always processes to be gone through, but I would say that I'm pretty confident on this matter.
Thank you. Let me now request Professor Silvia Bottega. She is an Italian, and Italy, of course, is a G20 member state. So, Professor Bottega.
Good morning, Dr. Jaishankar. Yes, I would like to ask you if in the agenda of this G20 there is an important, I think, question that probably India should more promote, for instance, creating or pushing more a regional form of economic cooperation in Asia, like there are, for instance, in Africa. There are many regional organizations below the African Union, like the South African Development Cooperation, ECOWAS, and others. What role India can play in this, promoting, pushing for an economic cooperation institutionalized beyond the BRICS, beyond forms of groupings, or like revitalizing the SARC forms like ASEAN, for instance, or other forms, for having this kind of confidence and attracting investment, which can really support the global South.
Thank you.
At this time, I think it's natural for the G20 to look at policies and measures which would revitalize economic growth. That is very, very badly needed. Now, how to revitalize that has many aspects of it. As I said, one very important part of it is to address, for example, the debt situations of many countries. Another aspect of it is to give them the resources so that they're not resource starved as they're coming out of a COVID situation, which is the case with many of them. Your particular observation that, can the G20 get involved in creating regional architectures? That's not really the remit of G20, because that's for the regions or the nations of a particular region to do. I mean, for example, we've just come out of a BRICS summit, and the BRICS countries decided that we will do a few more things, and we will also consider expanding the membership. But it's not an issue which we would really bring into the G20, because the composition of the G20 is very, very different. But I do understand the underlying message in your question, which is are there ways by which, say, for example, can connectivity be promoted? I think there would be a lot of interest in looking at that. So there would be a whole set of issues which may not, which directly or indirectly may feed into growth and development. And I think that family of issues would really be the core agenda of what we are looking at.
Right. We have time for just one last question. May I request Professor Swaran Singh, noted scholar, please?
Thank you. First of all, of course, compliments and congratulations for making 18th G20 unprecedented. Several firsts, dozens of firsts in 2023. My question flows from your initial remarks, which continued also in other rest of the conversation, of the growing polarization in East and West, and of course the divide of North and South that you mentioned. We understand now that for understandable reasons, President Putin and President Xi Jinping are perhaps not joining the summit meeting. How does that impact the role of playing the bridge in this growing polarization and divide, especially when we have still 81 days. India's presidency continues for 81 days beyond the summit meeting. Is that space something that you have in mind where that reinforcement could happen?
Thank
You
you.
know, Professor, at the end of the day, countries are represented by whoever they have chosen to represent them. So the levels of representations, do not become the final determinant of the position of a country. So, even we, there are occasions where sometimes, let us say, Prime Minister may go. There are occasions he may not go for whatever reason. So, I would say, rather than focus necessarily on who, which country chose to come at what level, the real issue is what position do they take when they come. That's really, finally, what is it we will remember this G20 for? We will remember this G20 for the outcomes it produced, for the fact that it suggested solutions or concepts or action avenues that were relevant to the key burning issues of the day. So, for me, what is really important is more the willingness and the, I would say, the enthusiasm of countries, the focus of countries to actually address these key issues. As I said, I have every expectation that they would, do that in a very responsible manner, understanding today the gravity of the international situation. And the other part of it, of course, is within our own country, because what it has done. I mean, the G20 actually has given me also an opportunity to travel around, see other G20 events, assess how people have responded to it. I actually have seen a huge spike in, and this, Professor, should be good for you, huge spike in the interest in international affairs. That, young people today have become so much more involved with what is happening in the world. They knew it intuitively, but it was one thing to see that, it's another thing to have a connect, to have a sense of ownership, to feel a sense of pride, and I must also say, it'll be very interesting to see what are even the short-term and medium-term consequences of the G20. That, will we see, for example, there are many more places in India which have shown up in the radar of global tourism. So will we see more tourists there? Will there be in different domains? Will scientists of other G20 countries know more of their Indian counterparts and therefore take forward more projects with them? Quite possible. We've had civil society engagement, so do our NGOs or labor, do our trade unions get more connected? So I think because we have taken such a sort of broad participative approach to G20, not only to the official meetings, even to the engagement groups. I think you're going to see a lot come out of this G20 beyond these outcomes, but I'm very confident, whatever the levels of representation that every G20 member will come to this meeting very, very seriously, very much in the mode that they have to make their contribution to what is an important inflection point today in global politics.
Inflection point, Dr. Jaishankar says, and viewers, the point is that this is a historic moment, there's no doubt about it, and India has stepped up the plate and is trying to hold the ship together. There are a lot of challenges, there's no question. Dr. Jaishankar is dealing with a lot of them, but he's still, bravely plowing ahead, because that's the nature of the world and of leadership. Leadership is always about facing big challenges, and India is trying to show.
I have the goodwill of 1.4 billion Indians, so it's easy to plow ahead with all of that.
And viewers, I just wanted to mention, Dr. Jaishankar said that through G20 presidency, we are making India ready for the world, and it's happening. And I think that's a very significant point, because if 1.4 billion people, like you said, have this consciousness about the world, and international affairs becomes, second nature to our own people, then we produce the thought leadership and the ideas that will then take us to the next level in terms of solving global problems. I want to thank Honorable External Affairs Ministers and this great audience for joining us today. It's a, G20 is like a, red letter mark for our country, and we are trying to do our utmost to try and resolve the enormous challenges that the world faces. All power to Dr. Jaishankar and his team. We hope that this G20 summit goes off smoothly and as expected, and it also generates those far long impact that we are looking for, because ultimately the world will only change if institutions are strong, and we are trying to strengthen global institutions. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. May I have standing applause from the audience, please?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Dr. Sriram. And now I'm going to request our Member Finance, Mr. Negi.
Well, that was India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, who was speaking at the DD Dialogue. He said the country is witnessing new heights. The minister also said India as a country is excelling in various sectors. He further added the upcoming G20 summit will be something to watch out for, and not just for India, but also for the entire world. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We will be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Siddharth Bharadwaj. From all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.
Namaskar and welcome to Changemakers. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. One of the joys of life is to be able to travel, see new places, meet new people. Tourism offers tremendous potential to make memories and foster new bonds. But if unchecked, it could also destroy ecosystems. How we travel has great bearing on our environment and the future of our world. Today, let's talk about sustainable tourism. Did you know tourism is responsible for a staggering 8% of global greenhouse emissions? Everything contributes to it, from how we travel, to where we stay, to what we eat during our vacations and holidays. Add to that, many popular tourist destinations are also fragile ecosystems. These places with limited resources are not meant to handle huge crowds and unchecked constructions. So, should we stop traveling? Of course not. But can we be more conscious of the ecological cost of our travels? Thanks to our changemakers, there are now places that take us closer to nature, places we can visit and enjoy alone or with friends and family without burdening the environment. Let's go. Sustainable tourism aims to create a positive relationship between communities and the people who visit them. Our changemakers are playing a key role in realizing this vision through their unique enterprises. Our first changemaker is Wild Rift Adventures from Kumaon division of Uttarakhand, founded by Manoj Chaudhary and Amit Marks in 1993. It is among the oldest community-centric ecotourism enterprises in the region. The adventure began with a small camp in Sattal, the first of its kind in Kumaon, on a disused garden close to the lake, leased from the irrigation department. The idea was simply to provide an adventure and nature-based alternative to the growing resort tourism in the lake region. Later, the team started to build linkages with the villages for a range of village visitor interactions. Soon, Camp Purple came up at Mukteshwar, atop a ridge facing the Himalaya, in an apple orchard leased from a local farmer. These camps were minimalist, activities were adventure and nature-based, itineraries and services were defined by the local place and predominantly local people working at the camp. As of today, Wild Rift is running 5 different campsites. The team believes without community control, the hope of tourism becoming engine for development is unrealistic and ecotourism is conceptually untenable. They operate through a network of community-owned ecotourism enterprises. The sites are pristine, lesser-known areas, mostly without any history of earlier tourism activities. For enthusiasts, there are adventures like trekking, mountain biking, kayaking in rivers. Besides serving local delicacies, use of lanterns at night are charming ways in which Wild Rift Adventures continues to draw nature lovers to its green camps. Our next changemaker is EcoPlore from New Delhi. Founded by Prerna Prasad and her team in 2016, EcoPlore is one of India's largest platform for booking eco-friendly hotels. EcoPlore onboards only those hotels that are made of mud, wood, bamboo, stone or any other local architecture. All the hotels promoted by EcoPlore need to maintain a minimum of 30% tree coverage inside their campus. These hotels also follow sustainable measures like rainwater harvesting, grey water treatment, composting and many more. The eco hotels are located close to nature. Some even have waterfall and water stream inside their campus. The eco hotels grow their own vegetables and fruits. They have several activities in and around the campus like trekking, birding, village tour, water surfing and more. A women-led initiative on sustainable travel. All these eco-hotels are personally visited and verified by solo women travelers to assure safety, hygiene, comfort for all the guests. Currently, EcoPlore has over 250 hotels across the country. Scaling it up, EcoPlore also has collaborations with eco-hotels in Europe and South Asia. A mud house in Delhi NCR is the newest addition to EcoPlore. One Bhoj is a living, sustainable museum where people can come and experience sustainable lifestyle. Such interesting ideas in action. Let's now meet our change makers, learn more about their work and vision. Let me welcome Manoj Chaudhary, co-founder Wild Drift Adventures, and Prerna Prasad, founder EcoPlore. We learnt about your fascinating enterprises. Welcome to Changemakers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shivendu. Thank you for inviting me on your platform.
First, I'd like to learn from both of you the manner in which ecotourism contributes to the larger idea of sustainable development.
Right. So, I mean, in the outset, we must understand what sustainable development means in the first place, in the sense of something that continues almost in perpetuity, without. So, very early we figured out that sustainable development for us meant that there is the beneficial impacts of whatever developmental activity, tourism developmental activity, what you're doing, far outweighs the negative impacts in terms of the socio-economic impacts that you make, in terms of the physical impacts that you're creating, in the geography, in the place. So, and it must, we felt, contribute to the local economy. And therefore, in ecotourism also, again, in the definition that we find most feasible, the community is a very important part of it, So, for us, there is no ecotourism without the community involvement. And not just involvement, but in an ownership control kind of a manner, where the community controls what happens in their area essentially. So, ecotourism, therefore, when it contributes economically, creates lesser impacts in, let's say, environment damage that we do with tourism activities. And therefore, we feel also the small scale of it, is very, very crucial in a sustainable developmental model, where a cluster of different villages running smaller operations come together as a whole, region to create a impactful tourism.
So there's this data which says that tourism industry contributes to almost 10% of the total carbon emission in the world. And this is huge. And people who go on a holiday, very few of them would be knowing about the carbon footprint which they're creating when they're going on the holiday. So the purpose or the motive behind why I started my platform was to contribute to reduction of the carbon emission which is contributed by the tourism industry.
Let's now talk about your individual enterprises. First, Wild Drift Adventures. Manoj, if I can come to you. Tell us about the journey of Wild Drift Adventures and particularly about the model of community-owned ecotourism that you present.
Right. So actually, when we started way back in '93, there were no camps as such in Kumaon. I mean, no forest camps in Uttarakhand. So ours was the first camp of its kind in Uttarakhand, the forest camp, I would say. And the idea was more like a dream to say, let's do a minimalist thing with adventure and nature and offer. Because in Nainital and other areas, we are seeing that only resort kind of stuff was happening. So we were more interested in something alternative. And since I was very much into the outdoors, I thought I cannot go into an office. We have to do something outdoors. So that's how actually we started initially. But then slowly I realized that there is no, you can go on doing these adventure activities in nature, which have a good impact on the visitor, considering they're getting a very alternative experience and close to nature experience. But I realized that there has to be some more meaningfulness into my work. So we sought the idea of, since I'm a very people's person, maybe. So I thought, okay, how we involve the communities, and that's when one of the development planners who I knew, she helped us in kind of saying that why don't you do community partnerships with the panchayats? That way the panchayat owns the place, and I mean they run the show, and we are facilitators for that. And the idea was to move from one panchayat to the other and set up a model like that.
That's very interesting. Manoj, if you can also tell us more about your team. You engage with a lot of local population, youth in the villages. How does that work?
Yes. No, so we've actually been very open wherever we've been, and we've maintained kind of village contacts initially through like providing opportunities like for a carpenter to be associated with the school groups that are coming. So that's how the villagers started getting into the work. They had skills on Ayurveda. One lady used to run an Ayurveda place earlier, so we involved her in the programs. So that's how we built the linkages initially. And eventually, when we decided to go into Corbett to form a really community-owned enterprise where we entered the village with the idea of community-controlled owned enterprise. And that's when it really took, when we were directly engaging with the community as a...
we see the model of tourism that you promote brings people closer to nature, closer to local communities. How do your guests, your visitors respond to such an ecosystem?
Yes. I mean, right from the beginning, we've been very kind of selective in our marketing, in the sense that people who resonate with this kind of an idea and not looking for the usual, let's say, amenities-based holidays,
Yes.
and who are seeking a more experiential-based holiday in terms of whether it's the adventure or the village interactions. So we've always in the development of our itinerary and interactions also, our focus has been from the host perspective, from the village perspective. What will work for them, and then we design the structure of the program around what will work for them, where we leave minimum kind of this thing. And as a result, because we are already working with the villagers,
Yes.
in official capacity as business partners, so there is more authenticity in the interaction that is created. So most of the visitors get very, very happy that there's nothing like, staged over there. The villagers are being themselves, the visitors are being kind of themselves. We give them a little briefing before going into the village or anything. We say what is the expected kind of behaviors in the village, the clothing and everything, sort of, including in the language and the softness. So, but mostly the response is great by whoever ends up coming with the minimal facilities that we offer. And most of our guests are repeat guests who comes up 3-4 times in a year also in a different site to experience a different community and and get refreshed with that. And I think they like the human aspect of their experience, because these are people who are living very different lives and nothing is staged. So like we've never done any folk music shows or anything. At the most, the villagers and the visitors are jamming together in the evening around the campfire. That sort of thing.
That's good to know. Now, going through the list of camps that you offer, each of them are located at pristine, beautiful locations in the lap of nature. A lot must also go into selecting these sites. What is the process that you follow?
Right. See, of course, whenever we select a site, we feel it should have a tourism potential. You know, it cannot be somewhere where tourists would not go. As a scenic, as a place that is there. So whenever we approach the village to look at a site, many times it's like, because we are like wanderers anyway. So we are wandering around so much that you end up in, like, we landed up in Shama, one of our very beautiful sites. It's on top of a hill facing the Himalayas. One of a very unique site, which we also still get like overwhelmed going there. I feel very privileged to be there, you know. But it was just happened one of our wanderings where we landed up and started talking to the villagers and say maybe we do something like this here. Most of these places are not, when we started at least, like in Sattal, there was no other kind of, apart from the government KMEN guest house, there was no other place to stay. We were the only other alternative there as a camping outfit. So but now it's got very crowded, and more we are finding it difficult to find spots where we run away from this kind of a mainstream resort style development, which is creeping in on a lot of places now.
Now, Manoj, we understand that sustainable tourism is a two-way process. The guests, the visitors have an equal role to play. Now, you have a set of very interesting rules to ensure that the camps, the sites remain clean and eco-friendly. How do the guests respond to such rules and adhere to them?
Yeah, I mean, these are rules, essentially they are from the nature and community perspectives. The rules are basically in kind of saying that we should not disturb much. Throw about disturbance, so it is there, but minimize it, And so most of the rules are based on that. So for example, like, we don't allow loud music in our camps, any loud music. So it is to say, no, when you are here, you listen to nature, you listen to the breeze, you listen to the birds, and I think people kind of don't mind these so much, so that we don't have electricity in most of our camps. We only have certain charging points now. This has become a little flexibility that we have allowed ourselves, considering the demand for it. But apart from that, we generally don't use electricity in our camps and things like that. And many people, and we use lanterns still, in the middle of, sometimes like in Mukteshwar, it got a little crowded and we are still sitting with the lantern over there, but we believe that this kind of a thing for the visitor works very well, actually, because it takes them a little out of their comfort zones for sure, but creates a new experience in this new technology zone where they don't have to use their phones all the time, or So it's also, the villages, many times in retrospect, I think most of the people enjoy, and many people have told us, don't ever get electricity here, much nicer without it, such a break. There's no places left like this, so
I'd also like to learn from you the manner in which sustainable tourism positively impacts the local communities, the local infrastructure, and the region. What kind of an impact have you observed?
Right. Firstly, we have kind of proven that the village people are have full capacity to do any kind of work. So here now the village people are running school groups, outdoor educational programs on their own without any facilitation from us. So one thing is for sure, that the capacity of the villages has built up quite a lot. It creates a lot of, let's say, examples where villagers feel, okay, I can do the enterprise myself, And secondly, a lot of kind of kind of multipliers have happened as a result of that, where we are sourcing certain things from the village, for example, or some other villagers who saw us doing some adventure activities, like in Sattal. We were the first ones to introduce kayaking in all of Kumaon. And now there are a lot of local enterprises which are running on kayaking over there. So it has shifted from a dhaba style or to a more, let's say, adventurous style of enterprise, where they earlier thought we can't do much except sell bhuttas. But now they can imagine that they can do a lot of things, and they have done. In most of the sites, we've seen a lot of these multipliers happen by other enterprises, and we always reach out to them in a cooperative manner, not as a competition. We say, we'll share whatever, so that sort of a thing. So it works for them and it works for us.
That's great, Manoj. It's fascinating to learn about the work and journey of Wild Rift Adventures. Let's now talk about EcoPlore. Prerna, I'll come to you. Tell us about the journey of EcoPlore. How did it begin? And you were a journalist. How did you make the switch?
So in 2016, I worked as a journalist for almost 8 years, and in 2016, we had gone on a holiday to Malaysia, and it took me almost 1 month to find out 5 eco-friendly hotels where I would stay in. And since the country was a place which I did not know much about, it took me so much of time. But when I visited those hotels, the experience of living in each of them was very, very unique and amazing. Like, I still remember the image of those hotels in my mind. And that's when I decided that when I come back to India, I will work on aggregating a list of eco-friendly hotels which people would choose out from. And the purpose behind it was that we all want a perfect system, we want luxury, we want comfort, but without clean air and pure water, everything else is worthless. So the idea of working on ecotourism was to combine my passion towards travel and adding the environmental aspect of it by making it more sustainable.
That's interesting. Prerna, just to understand, what are the broad parameters that makes a hotel, a resort, eco-friendly?
So it actually took me almost 2 years of ground visits, visiting different sustainable hotels across the country. And since India is it has a very diverse geography. So a desert area hotel in a desert area will be very different from a hotel in a dense forest. So I came up with 2 common criteria which any hotel could fulfill, except a few of them. Was that the building of the hotel or the rooms should be made of local material. So it could be mud, wood, bamboo, stone, but not concrete. And second was that at least 30% tree coverage should be maintained in the campus of these hotels, because that's the basic minimum which any hotel could fulfill. And apart from them, we have many other sustainable measures which the hotels fulfill different from one geography to another. And these are like solar panels, rainwater harvesting, composting, waste management, and many others depending on their geography and availability.
Okay, tell us about the economics of sustainable tourism from the perspective of businesses as well as the customers. How's it a good deal for them both?
Before COVID, like since I started my company almost in 2016, and we started selling the hotels in 2019. So before COVID, it took me almost half an hour to convince like one customer and tell them what an eco-friendly hotel would look like, because people had a lot of misconceptions. They used to think like many would still think, but they used to think that a mud house would be leaking, because that's the image they have from their mud houses which are present in their villages. They used to think that these sustainable hotels made out of local material may not have a Western commode. It could be unhygienic. So these were the misconceptions which many people had in their mind. But post-COVID, there was a lot of change, because people were stuck in their houses for almost 2 years, and then they realized the value of nature. They wanted to choose alternative accommodations when they're traveling. So the idea of homestays, the idea of hotels which are eco-friendly, the idea of boutique properties run by individuals became more prominent post-COVID. And now at least we don't have to explain to people what these hotels look like. And that is why there is a lot of there is rise in revenue, there is rise in conversion rate of the customers who are choosing sustainable hotels, and this is going to rise in future, because we all know how climate change is affecting us. So and as there are more trees being cut, as the forests are being reduced, there is more demand for it, because it is getting reduced. So so the demand for sustainable hotels is going to increase in future.
Right. Prerna, also it's interesting with EcoPlore how solo women travelers vet a certain hotel before it is listed on your site. How neglected had this aspect of tourism in India been so far?
So being a women traveler myself, I think that was main reason which made me think about it. Because being a women traveler, traveling to multiple places on a solo basis, I realized the safety aspect myself. And there was one very important, like a very incident which I'll always remember. We went to a hotel to verify it in Rishikesh, and we were like almost 4 women. We were all friends. We went for a holiday, and also on the same basis we went to verify it. And there was a man sitting, he was the manager of the hotel, and we asked him that how many employees do you have in your company, and it was a chain of hotels. He said we have almost 300 people. And then we asked that how many women employees do you have. He said just one, who is the daughter of the owner of the hotel.
Oh.
And he was so proud to say that. I mean, that was the aspect which made me realize that we need to have more women in the industry, and only then the travel for women will become more safe. So then we started focusing on vetting and visiting each of these hotels, especially by solo women, so that once a woman finds it safe and comfortable, I'm sure that a family or a male traveler would automatically find it safe.
That's very interesting to learn. And just as you have stringent measures for hotels to be listed on Ecoplore, do you also feel the need to sensitize the tourists so that they play their role in ensuring sustainable tourism?
So I think this question of having responsible travelers, and while we have good focus on the hotels, is very important. Because the idea of weekend getaways is becoming very popular. People travel for 500 kilometers just to spend a night, and they party and they come back. So slow travel is one aspect which I would like to highlight, where earlier, like, we used to at least travel for a week, or we used to visit our grandparents' place, and we used to travel for 15 days, 1 month, and there the carbon emission was less because there was lesser travel involved, and people used to spend time at a location. Secondly, the idea of going on a travel and playing loud music and just partying and coming back, this has also become very popular, especially by the people living in metro cities. So I think here the hotel owners, like for example, a lot of hotels which we promote, they're particular about the kind of visitors they get. They actually speak to the traveler or the visitor and try to understand what's the mindset, why they want to come. Yesterday only I was talking to a owner of a hotel, and he said that if they want to party, then they should go and party at a restaurant. We don't want them to party at a hotel. And because the hotels are responsible, they want responsible tourists also. So I think we need to sensitize the travelers while providing them good, comfortable hotel. Like, we are focusing on providing a comfortable hotel to tourists, but at the same time, we need to sensitize the tourists as well.
On that note, thank you very much, Prerna, Manoj, for joining us on Changemakers and sharing your fascinating stories. Our best wishes to your teams. Thank you.
It was great meeting our Changemakers. Responsible traveler makes sustainable tourism possible. As tourists, let's be mindful of our choices. You see, however far we may travel, there is only but one home, and that's the home that we all share together. So where are you traveling next? I'm going in search of our next Changemaker. See you soon. Namaskar.
Hello and welcome to the special weekly show on DD India called Diaspora Diamonds, which is our salute to over 32 million strong Indian diaspora present in over 200 countries worldwide. I'm Gautam Roy. The show launched the same day, same time earlier this year, around the time the 17th Pravasi Bharatiya Divas Convention was held in Madhya Pradesh's Indore city. PBD provides a platform for the overseas Indian community to engage with the government and the people of India and share their experiences and insights. It also helps strengthen the ties between India and global Indian diaspora and to recognize the achievements and contributions of Indians living abroad. The Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Awards are an integral part of the biennial event and are conferred by the President of India upon members of the Indian diaspora who've made exceptional contribution in their chosen fields and have acted as India's ambassadors in foreign lands. Our guest this week is one such awardee this year. Mohanlal Hira, recipient Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award and Gandhian. First of all, congratulations for the award. What were your first thoughts when you heard that you're getting the highest honor that the Indian government can give to an Indian living abroad, which in your case is South Africa?
I was shocked first of all, and then I was very happy I was overwhelmed. I still can't believe it that I've got this award.
Okay, and what can you tell us about your journey from India to South Africa? I believe you were just 9 years old when your family moved to that country just before India became independent. How was it growing up in South Africa, having to contend with apartheid and international isolation?
Yeah, it was, look, the journey was very good. My father called us in 1947. I went with my mother and my sister. From then onwards, I went to school in what you call South Africa, in Johannesburg. And the journey to high school and it was tough because of the apartheid law. We were restricted to even go to what you call other communities. We could not mix with the communities, and we grew up as an Indians, but we also mixed with other black community like the South African locals and us, and that's how we grew up. The journey is very, very tough because we were restricted with everything in South Africa. But today it has changed, and we are proud that we are independent. I mean, South Africa is independent, and we can do what we want to, and we can move where we want to. We were restricted with the land, everything. We couldn't get lands anywhere else, but we couldn't be a custodian of land also. So that was a problem. Education-wise, we were given a special education. It was called Indian education, and of course, the Bantu had blacks had a Bantu education and things like that. So it was very difficult to sort of carry on whatever, but we continued and we moved forward. Thank you very much, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, you've been given the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman Award for your contributions in the field of community welfare. Your profile for the award says you're one of the oldest Gandhians in South Africa who've played a pivotal role in keeping Gandhiji's legacy alive and reviving the iconic Gandhian site of Tolstoy Farm in Johannesburg. Now, how did that come about?
See, when I was in India, my grandfather was also in South Africa before my father. And before I left, he used to tell me about Mahatma Gandhi, what he did in South Africa, and because they were associated together. He used to say is that, look, Gandhi's sacrifice is to walk from Johannesburg to his office from Lenasia, from his Tolstoy farm to what you call Johannesburg every morning. Him and his friend Kallenbach used to walk around there. And he used to walk from 3 o'clock to what you call come back again by 5 o'clock. What you call prarthana used to be ready. So 5 o'clock we used to have a prarthana. So that inspired me. I said, the man walked from here, from his house to what you call to workplace, back, and inspired me a lot because he fought for Indians in South Africa. Actually, he fought for everybody.
Yes.
And that's what inspired me.
Certainly. Now, your profile also says that it's due to your efforts that the Tolstoy Farm has a proper legal title in favor of Mahatma Gandhi Remembrance Organization, a trust closely associated with you. Now, what is the significance of this legal title and what are your plans for Tolstoy Farm?
See, we were given 4 hectares of land. Before that, there was a house built by form a, what you call, form an organization. Then it was neglected and people, what you call, vandalized it. There was nothing left there, only grass was growing there. So when I saw that this thing is really not good, and Mahatma Gandhi's legacy must stay in South Africa because he's a proper South African. He got Mahatma title of Mahatma in South Africa, so he worked towards us. So I thought to myself, I said, no, it cannot die down. And eventually, I took on myself to build the thing up. When we started building it up, today it's a structure. Everything is ready. A beautiful garden, house, library, and we are also trying to build now what you call recreation center and to do other work on Tolstoy Farm. That is our vision. What you call Tolstoy Farm is what you call officially given to us by the government who owns the land, and they have it's deed of donation. They have donated the land to our organization. That's how it is.
All right. Now, India and South Africa have had trade, investment and cultural linkages and exchanges for decades in the post-apartheid phase. They're both emerging economies and share democratic, pluralistic and other values. How is the Indian community in South Africa helping to build upon these commonalities and links?
We always try and help everybody. We are trying to build a nation that is a rainbow nation, and we have done it already. We are always linked with all our people here, businesses, what you call, do support all the other organizations. And it's a wonderful way of doing things. And, most of our people are very generous and giving people. And that's how we build